To my first update for today, and Andrew Haythorpe is a mining executive with nearly 20 years experience establishing startup enterprises in a variety of sectors. He has held a number of company chair and board positions as well as being the CEO of several successful listed minerals and resources organisations as well. I should add, the man has a reputation, and he joins me now. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Mike. Yourself?
Doing well, Andrew. It's an impressive rap sheet, but you wanted to talk a bit about minerals today, and we're talking about silica sands and what exactly they're used for and how the market's been going. So let's start off with what exactly is silica sands and how are they used across the day-to-day operations of worldwide industries?
Well, silica sand is probably better known as quartz sand to most people. But certainly when it comes to the applications, silica sand ends up in products such as mobile phones, your glass, etc. Daily part of our life for hundreds of years. It's an essential ingredient for modern society and modern infrastructure. And of course it has many new applications. So the silica sand market is growing rapidly with new applications such as solar panels, etc., mobile phones, etc. And also supply is being restricted because a lot of silica sand in the world over the last few hundred years has been mined from areas which we would now classify as environmentally sensitive, or the areas they're being mined have been reclassified into high value areas for recreational purposes, etc. In fact, many cities have been built on a lot of silica sand deposits, so therefore the silica sand is simply not available anymore.
Isn't that fascinating to think? All you've got to do is take one look at downtown any city and think about all the silica sand that could be used for that. But let's talk about the global market for silica sands. And I suppose you've touched on where the supply comes from and where it's sort of unreachable. But talk to us a little bit further about that.
Well, silica, according to some independent estimates, is the second largest commodity traded globally by volume.
Wow.
Ironically, the first commodity traded by volume is water, silica second, and then you have all of the other mineral commodities that follow along after that, as well as fertilizer and ag sort of products. So the silica market's very large, and there's two aspects to it, such as what we're looking at there. You can see some cleaner sand, which is more likely to be high purity silica, the sort of material that we're interested in. And the browner sand is what you often see used in the building industry, so literally bricks and mortar, cement, etc. So there's a higher cut of high purity silica sand in terms of value and where it ends up. And then there's the lower sort of bulk cut, so to speak, which is the building applications.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. You've outlined, it's used in all sorts of things. So what's the current demand/supply balance, I suppose, for the sands, and who's taking it all?
So actually, it's a good question. So on the lower end of the spectrum, from what we're seeing, and this is just our early look, into the market opportunity, we just keep getting reports that even with building sand and building material inputs, there's a shortage in Australia and parts of Asia where the existing source of supply of building sand has been restricted, or those leases have operated for decades, post World War II reconstruction, etc. And we've just got to that critical tipping point where no longer can we rely on those sources of sand. And as Australia itself moves past 26 million population and onwards and upwards with its growth aspirations, we need new sources of supply of sand. So that's one level. The bit that I guess we're really focused on, and certainly is our main interest at the moment, is the high purity silica sand, which does end up in your high technology applications. So that is things like fibre optic cables, solar panels, of course, with solar energy generation, and of course, mobile phones and computer services, which have both silica in their screens and silica inside their circuitry.
Yeah, I think people have been taking sand for granted somewhat. I understand that we actually send sand to Hawaii to repair their beaches, so there's a lot of sand moving around the space. But you come from Allup Silica. Talk to us a little bit about why Allup Silica is going to be successful, just to wrap up the program for us.
Absolutely. Well, so with Allup Silica, yes, having sand is important, having purity is valuable. And then, of course, you need access to markets, which in the Australian language means you need reasonable access to ports. So what we started 2 years ago was to identify the potential high purity sources of silica, the ability to clean that up in a very high purity silica sand and resource opportunity where the land access is okay, but equally and thirdly, reasonable access to ports so that we can transport that material to port. So we've identified it in simple terms 4 project areas with reasonable access to 4 ports. And so for us, that simply de-risks our opportunity to get the first project up and running. And then on that, we can build up a portfolio of more projects in coming years. So we see a sequential step approach to the business where we can start small.
I'm picturing a very impressive sand castle, just to throw that pun in there. Andrew, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the program, because it is something that people aren't really considering, and it was very interesting to sort of unpack with you today.
Thank you very much. It's all up from here.